A state of emergency was declared in Haiti this week after multiple gangs attacked local prisons and released thousands of inmates. Locals are referring to the carnage as, quote, days of terror, end quote. Of the many important aspects to this story, the most interesting, one gang leader's nickname is Barbecue. I didn't make that up. Welcome to episode 2 of Headlines in History with your host, John Mollett. Let me start by saying that what I said in the intro is certainly true. One of Haiti's notorious gang members and leader of the most recent chaos is Jimmy Cherizier, aka Barbecue.
Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier is on the warpath, and his demands are frightening.
If Ariel Henry doesn't step down, the country will suffer a genocide. If Ariel Henry doesn't step down, if the international community continues to support Ariel Henry, they will lead us directly into a civil war that will end in genocide.
He got this name purportedly from setting houses on fire. Now, Cherizier claims it's because his mother sold fried chicken, not because he burns houses. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Nevertheless, Jimmy is a former cop fired in 2018 after being accused of committing many violent crimes, one of which, the La Saline massacre, left 70 dead and 400 houses burned. He's now leading the gang revolt among the streets that he once patrolled. His gang, the Revolutionary Forces of the G9 families and allies, or just the G9, made up of over 10 gangs, maybe even a dozen or more, they now control over 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. In 2022, he was sanctioned by the United Nations for placing barricades around Haiti's main port to stop the government's ability to trade goods back and forth. Why is he doing what he's doing? He claims to be defending the poor against the elites. Sound familiar? It should, given that most revolutions in history started in much the same way, right? It's in the very definition of revolt, which is to, quote, rise in rebellion, end quote. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Spanish War of Independence, the Russian Revolution, they're all about standing up, rising up against an elite, which there is an elite in Haiti today, and much of the populace is in severe poverty. So what's the concern specifically now? Why are we talking about Haiti today? Haiti's been under some form of unrest. I mean, some could even argue for almost its entire history, but certainly over the last couple of decades, gangs have really taken hold throughout the country, at least throughout the urban areas of the country. I mean, many people live in the rural areas of Haiti, but the gangs are controlling most of the urban areas. This week, though, Haiti's Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, was in Kenya trying to sign a deal that would allow 1,000 Kenyan troops into Haiti to battle the gangs. Again, since this has been happening for a while, the Prime Minister has been out looking for people to help, okay? Now, as an aside, this would do little because Kenyan forces have little experience in urban warfare, which is what would be required if they were to come in and help out the National Police Force in Port-au-Prince, but nonetheless. This gave our man Barbecue an opening to launch a full-fledged coup, which he did this week. The country's director of national police said that the capital is, quote, at war, end quote. It's as bad as it's ever been. Henry is now stuck in Puerto Rico after being denied landing rights in the Dominican Republic. So after he had the deal signed in Kenya, he got on a plane and wanted to return. First of all, he couldn't get into Haiti because as the gangs, specifically Barbecue's group of gangs, are taking over control of Port-au-Prince, they also took control of the airport. So he can't land in Haiti. So then he looked to land in the Dominican Republic just next door, and they said no. And so he had to land in Puerto Rico, and reportedly that's where he is right now. The other reason he probably wouldn't have even wanted to land in Haiti, even if he had the opportunity to do so, was that he probably wouldn't be able to escape assassination. There's just not enough security right now for him to protect himself. Why is this guy, the current prime minister, so hated, at least by these gang members? Well, after the assassination, interestingly, of Haiti's former president in 2021, Prime Minister Henry said that he would hold elections, and he never did. And so now most of the public in Haiti are upset that their leadership is an unelected leader and he doesn't want to or hasn't attempted to hold elections. Now, his counter argument is that the security situation is so bad he can't do that. That's an unacceptable answer from most of the public, so they remain pretty upset about it. Now, you might ask, why is it that the police, or at least the military, they can't handle the violence from the gangs that's occurring right now? They simply don't have the resources or the training. The gangs are far too powerful. There are still many police that show up to work every day doing everything that they should to keep at peace against all odds. This is the sort of patriotism and bravery we can certainly all applaud. But nonetheless, there's just not enough of them. The United States and others have sent weapons and tactical vehicles. You can often see MRAPs, the U.S. Army's mine-resistant ambush-protected tactical vehicles, in news footage. This is certainly this is equipment that was sold to Haiti in previous years to help combat the gangs. And also, remember that the numbers are skewed right now because, as I said in the intro, thousands of prisoners were released and have joined the fight as of last week. Doing some research into the topic here today, there were multiple prisons that were attacked and prisoners were released. One of them had 1,000 prisoners go missing. One of them had 3,000 prisoners go missing. So you're talking thousands and thousands of individuals prone to violence in prisons are now out, have rejoined their gangs that they likely were arrested for being a part of previously, and are now out fighting the government. Haiti's leadership, in response, knows it needs help and has requested an international peacekeeping force to join the Haitian National Police to combat the gangs. The problem with that is that there already was a UN quasi-peacekeeping force in Haiti in 2017, and there was a disaster because of it. There was poor leadership with the UN. There were accusations of sexual assault against Haitian citizens. It was not a good look. So now there's already a trust issue between Haitian leadership and the UN. That's only just a few years old. Now, the other question you may be asking is where do the gangs get all their gear? Well, they buy their weapons from corrupt police and military members. They're certainly involved in smuggling. And interestingly, they purchase a bunch of weapons from profiteers who are in Florida, mainly Florida because it's so close geographically. So there are investigations that have recently concluded where the Department of Justice has come out and released information that there are people just selling weapons into Haiti because they're looking to buy it. It's a supply and demand issue. And so weapons are flooding into the country this way. Also, you have an internal problem, and that politicians within Haiti have paid gangs in order for them to do their bidding. So politicians either give them weapons, sell them weapons, or allow them to use weapons so they can take action against their political rivals, whatever that may mean. And ever since the gangs have become wealthy enough to operate independently, they really have stopped taking as much direction from the politicians and have gone off and started doing their own thing. They've started to operate with their own goals in mind. And so part of the problem is internal to the Haitian government. How does the U.S. Feel about this? So recently there was a statement, specifically Matthew Miller, a State Department spokesman, said this.
And what we are saying to the Prime Minister is that he needs to expedite the transition to empowered and inclusive governance, including the appointment of a transition council.
What the U.S. is basically saying here is that at one point when they were supportive of current Prime Minister Henry, it looks as if now that they're shifting a little bit. They're not calling for his ousting. They're not calling for him to resign. But what they are saying is they would like to see him hold elections as he claimed that he would do, and then at the very least put a plan together for a transitional government so the transitional government can be a bit more inclusive and try to answer some of the questions, or at least pay attention to some of the gripes that the public has. And this would include some of the gang members as well. On top of our friend Barbecue, he's not the only individual that's vying for power and trying to affect change. He just happens to be the most violent and happens to be in charge of the most people. There's another pretty prominent individual, Guy Felipe. He helped lead a separate coup in 2004, so he has a little bit of experience with this. He also wants to take the lead He's a former convict, though. He spent 6 years in Atlanta after being indicted by the United States. He was then extradited to Florida for his charges, and then he spent 6 years in Atlanta on drug trafficking charges. But as you might imagine, he's returned. He's as fed up over the criminal gang activity in the country. He's also as fed up as our man Barbecue in regards to the current political leadership, but he doesn't have the type of security posture behind him. He doesn't have control of the gangs like Barbecue does. So, ironically, if Guy were to get involved in somehow getting his hands on leadership, he would have to most likely broker some kind of a deal with Barbecue, who's got the weapons. Guy may have the political authority, but Barbecue has the weapons. So, a bit of irony built in there. Now, so let's build some historical context, because that's what we do here. So we'll go back into Haitian history a little bit so we can help provide a little bit of context as to what's happening as we sit here today. So Haiti's a small country in the Caribbean. Specifically, it sits on the island of Hispaniola. It occupies about 30% of the island of Hispaniola. The other 60, 65, 30, 35, whatever the numbers play out, is the Dominican Republic. So it's on the west. The Dominican Republic is on the east, rather. Its name stands for the land of tall mountains, about 11.5 million in terms of the population. It's also, unfortunately, the poorest country in the West, if you want to, in the Western Hemisphere. Now, deep into history, it was discovered by Columbus, 1492. So it initially, outside of the, inside of the indigenous people, it first had Spanish European influence. As you might imagine, the Spanish who came took a bunch of resources forcefully. They left, and then the French came in afterwards. So that's where you have this long lineage of French cultural connections. That's why you have Haitian Creole spoken, and then French is another official language in the country, because the history with the French is much longer than it was the Spanish. Interestingly, when Napoleon came to power, he decided to come to Haiti because there was French control, but there was unrest, if you will. And so Napoleon decided he was going to reassert French authority. He was going to come over to Haiti and handle whatever issues he needed to handle. Ended up getting into a couple of wars. The first one that he won against the locals. The second one he lost in 1803. And not fully defeated, but lost enough where he wanted to leave. And so in 1804, Haiti declared independence. Napoleon's answer, instead of coming back to Haiti to, again, reassert control, he basically said, okay, well, if you pay me, then I'll leave you alone. So I'm just going to give you this big bill, and you can pay off this massive amount of debt for all the money I had to spend to come over here on my soldiers and all of the other things. And so you'll pay the debt. And there was an agreement at that point. So Haiti was able to declare independence. France was okay with that. And then they had their first big bill. And unfortunately, the effects of that debt are still being felt today. So moving forward out of the 1800s into the 1900s, the 20th century, in 1915, the United States, of course, decided to get into the mix by occupying the island between 1915 and 1934. Now, the reason for that is because, 1915, that's in the middle of World War I. And the United States, even though it hadn't joined the war yet, that wouldn't be until 1917, they were still on the side of the Allies ideologically. And the enemy at that time consisted of Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. And so the United States felt that Germany, which was trying to exert some influence in Haiti, was getting a little too close, was operating in the Western Hemisphere when they didn't want them to. So the United States occupied for nearly 2 decades as a way to try to push back on that potential German influence in the region. Now, because this episode can't get enough of the nicknames, Papa Doc steps in to the picture. Now, who is Papa Doc? This is Dr. Francois Duvalier, who won elections in 1957, right? So a couple decades after the United States left. Similarly to many leaders in Haiti's past, he claimed to support the poor, but as you may have guessed it, spent a lot of time enriching himself, created a private military to protect himself and go after his political rivals and kill some of his political leaders. Oh, and for good measure, he claimed after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in the United States that he was responsible because of a voodoo curse. So just to give you an understanding of his mindset. interestingly, and as an aside, many Haitians practice voodoo. So this isn't really all that shocking coming from the president at that time. It combines West African spiritualism with the worship of Roman Catholic saints. So there's actually a common saying in the country, and that is Haitians are 70% Catholic, 30% Protestant, and 100% voodoo, interestingly enough. Today, religious ceremonies and marriages are held in traditional voodoo and are actually recognized by the government. Now, let me give you another aside, an intriguing, somewhat sinister side of the story, too, from one of my favorite polemics of all time, the late Christopher Hitchens, connects Mother Teresa, believe it or not, Mother Teresa, to the Duvalier family. You can check the interwebs for that accusation and the details on that, but that is a whole fascinating sub-story to this whole Duvalier family. Nonetheless, his son, after Duvalier, Papa Doc, died, his son eventually took over. Yep, you guessed it, Baby Doc. That was his nickname. He took over, but then eventually he fled to France. Just a couple of years later. After he fled, elections were held, a left-leaning politician was elected, another coup happened, and it kicked him out. Now, this time, the United States decided to get involved in terms of the political transition. So they initiated Operation Uphold Democracy, which sent about 20,000 American troops down into Haiti to restore order and reinstate the democratically elected official who was ousted just a few years earlier. That happened, and then on into the 2000s we go, where crime, poverty, even severe weather with multiple hurricanes and earthquakes have really continued to ravage the country. So here's where we stand today. As you no doubt have concluded by listening to the episode here today, Haiti has a pretty long history of unrest. This is just the latest in a long line of internal security collapses. Who's to blame? Not today. We've talked about that, but strategically and historically. Well, like everything else in foreign affairs, it's complicated. Some of the highlights that we can certainly say have brought us to where we are today, one of which is colonialism. We know from our study of history that European colonialism has caused some pretty damaging effects worldwide that Europe is still dealing with, the rest of the world is still dealing with, but Europe is trying to make up for today. They never will be able to, but even though the United States is not a quote-unquote colonialist country, some even throw the U.S. in there for some of their actions meddling overseas, if you will. So colonialism plays a role. And then in Haiti in particular, you really go back to that debt that was put on by Napoleon after his defeat. And it's not uncommon in those days for empires to grant or even allow independence and then say, yeah, we'll let you do what you have to do. You just got to give us a bunch of money. But that ends up creating issues in the long term. Right? Many wars can be, many uprisings, many revolutions can point to similar events in history as to the foundation of why, as to the main purpose as to why the war started. Hitler said the same thing after World War I in the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was unable to financially pay back the reparations that were demanded of them by Europe after all of the damage that was caused. And so obviously there are many other issues on top of it, but that was one of the biggest arguments, is that Germany couldn't pay. Well, Haiti couldn't pay. The problem with Haiti is that it couldn't go ahead and invade the rest of Europe and couldn't cross the ocean to invade France to eliminate the debt. Hitler just had to cross through Czechoslovakia and Poland. The mass debt that Haiti struggled to give back or struggled to pay back, what happens? We know less education, less trust in government, increased crime and chaos in the cities. Then eventually you get to a point where there's military coups, and now you have really the history of Haiti. Where are we going to end up with where we stand today? It's tough to say at this point. The coup isn't significantly different than any other coup that's happened in the past, as we've kind of detailed here today. Ultimately, I don't see the country coming apart completely. They're certainly going to struggle. They certainly have to find their way out of whether the prime minister wants to resign, whether he's going to bring forth a transitional government. Something's going to have to happen. Something has to move forward. I don't see it completely collapsing. I think the United States, in particular, the United Nations would probably get involved again if they thought that was the case. I'm sure the United States and some of our European allies are going to apply pressure to make sure that happens. So I just don't see. I'm not seeing yet where there's an indicator that the entire thing is going to come apart. Hopefully, we see a transition in government being appointed, something akin to a multi-party platform that can provide a sense of calm. I suspect that the prime minister won't spend too many days in Puerto Rico. They'll eventually have to find a way for him to get back into country. Maybe. I mean, I guess the gangs could take over. I just don't think there are enough indicators right now to really point in one direction or the other than the fact that I just don't think it's gonna come completely apart. So it could be a potential challenge as we have barbecue on everyone's lips. I know, too far. Hey, we'll see you next episode.